All right, so welcome in today. We're going to dive into a handful of projects, but also look at some strategies that could be affecting the markets here, maybe the next few months, but definitely into 2024. We'll break it all down for you. We've got a special guest for you today, should you want to miss it. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today is Jordi Alexander, who is a macro and crypto trader coming in from Selini Capital. Great to see you back on the show, Jordi.
Good to be back, Paul. I'm excited.
Yeah,
This is
it's been
a
a
lot
while.
easier times than, the last times were a lot tougher. Now things are
Yes.
feeling downhill now.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Hey, Jordi, let's go into a little bit about what you guys are doing here of late. In the pre-show, we kind of talked a little bit about a project you're working on. Share a little bit about that, just so I kind of get a framework of what's up.
Yeah, sure. So Selini Capital, which is, the firm I'm the chief investment officer, we invest both venture and also do, algorithmic trading, market making. That's been high demand lately with a lot of projects launching and very successfully as well. We'll get into PYTH and some of the other ones that we've been assisting lately. And
Yep.
the other thing we do is, we advise a lot of projects, and I'm personally very close to Mantle, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum. I spend a lot of my time devising strategy, try to build good products for people. With Mantle, it's quite clear. We have a very, very unique proposition. One is there's the largest treasury in all of crypto. The largest DAO is Mantle DAO. So it's a few $1 billion, a lot of Ethereum as well, about 300,000 Ethereum and a lot of stable coins and other assets. This treasury is kind of like a power weapon that other layer 2s can have. And the difference it makes is that any app that deploys instantly gets a lot of support as long as it's a high quality and safe, secure ecosystem app. So
Right.
that's one weapon that we've been yielding. And of course, we've kind of been looking like, how do we provide the best experience to users? And I think, even though it's become very memeable lately, but the concept of native yield, we've seen that with Blast, and this has sort of been discussed in the community in the last few weeks because of that. But that's something that Mantle has been working on. It's been over 9 months, so we've been trying to do true native yield. And true native yield means, you don't just stake into Lido and die. You try to create the best instrument you can. So we've created both a Mantle ETH and a Mantle USD. And those are sort of what we've tried to create as the best in class yield-bearing asset. So the Mantle ETH, which is the meth, I think people will get a lot of memes out of the meth. That's coming live next week, actually. So it's a really exciting time. This is going to be a competitor to like Lido or Rocket Pool. We're going to have the highest yield. So we're pretty excited about the meth.
Excellent. Okay, very cool. All right, so that makes a lot more sense to it. I think, with especially with what you're talking about in terms of native yield, that's a factor we've been talking about here on the channel quite a bit. Actually, we just did a video on a whole slew of tokens that we're watching for, 2024 that kind of fall into that category. And one or two we're going to talk about today. PYTH, you mentioned, kind of a counter to Chainlink. I want to get your opinion on that. Before we go all the way into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about soft landings and whether or not we could really see that. Because I think environment, as you and I have talked about before, environment is everything in the investing world. Sometimes you get pressures, sometimes there's loose markets, and we're starting to see a little bit of action. Do we see a Santa rally? All those kind of things. What is your opinion right now as to whether or not the U.S. could navigate a soft landing in here?
Yeah, I've never been like a true believer in the soft landing narrative. I thought that, there's no free lunch, and all the crazy things that you're doing for the last years would have to at some point reach a hard landing. So far we haven't seen that hard landing. I think a lot of it is due to the unique position of the US dollar and how that, gives a lot more buffer for printing, for mistakes than otherwise there would be. I think ultimately they will have to cut rates at some point and we will have some slowdown. But yeah, just the unique power of the reserve currency of the world, being the US dollar, has shown quite a lot of resilience, and the hard landing has not appeared yet. I do think eventually we will see a hard landing. Every time that we've gone close to it, I think every time that we record, there's something bad going on. This is the first time there's nothing bad going on, but we've recorded during like Deutsche Bank falling apart. That was the last time we spoke. And, they just kind of paved over it. They just, they bailed out the banks, the depositors. kept on trucking, and here we go. So if it's such a strong currency, obviously, like that would not be the game. That would not work. But for now, it's been working. Hopefully it keeps working. Obviously, we saw the GDP numbers.
Mhm.
The inflation number was pretty favorable a few weeks ago as well. So at this point, we keep trucking.
I want to jump to a tweet here. This is talking from Kevin Svensson. 3 years ago, Bitcoin was sitting at strikingly similar setup, and this is really kind of leaning into the halving that's coming in, first part of next year. If you look at the current position around the halving, first of all, do you feel that the halving for Bitcoin is still as important as ever from a mining standpoint, or do you feel like this is just another indicator in the market now?
I don't think it's as important as it was, in 2020. It does still matter. So this is probably the last happening that does matter in terms of the measurable decrease in supply. Is many billions of dollars. It still is significant. We're going, from when you go from 4% inflation to 2% inflation a year, that's huge. When you go from 2% to 1% approximately, that's still significant. I think, in 2027, 2028, whenever the next one's going to be, going from 1% to 0.5%, and then, those are less significant numbers. But right now, I think it does still matter. It's like voodoo. It's like magic. I don't understand how we always get these perfectly timed cycles. It does feel exactly like
weird.
sort of 2020 right now.
Yeah.
And somehow, yeah, we're exactly back where we were. All the dips are getting bought. People, I think it's, random, but last time we had COVID and all the money printing, this time we have an ETF. There always seems to be some reason why, in anticipation of the halvening, we get this like amazing kind of price action.
Yeah, this gets into my whole theory around sentiment and how crowds move, much like schools of fish. And if you look at where activity occurs, which a lot of times is crypto Twitter and other places out there within the degens of, our investment groups that are out there that everybody's following, and then it moves to the one next, and then you get that whole network effect. Raul Paul talks a lot about this, and I think now we're starting to see the underlying factors, back to your point with ETF, saying, oh, well, this is why, So I think those are the, some factors that kind of play into this. I was looking at this chart right here, cycle comparison, 144 days until the halving, and they show, this range right here. It has so many eerily similar relationships to what we've seen in the past in terms of these cycles. So it's a very interesting time right now. What do you make of Bitcoin at its current price, current around 37, 38K as we record this? Some people now pointing to maybe we could see a 40 to 50K Bitcoin prior to an ETF actually getting approved.
Yeah, I concur with that. I can definitely see 45K around the end of the year. It sounds crazy given where we were at the beginning of the year, around like 16 to 20K, and trying to fight through that range. And we're well past the double and
Right.
kind of looking at more. But it seems very realistic right now. Whether it happens in January or, a little bit later, I'm quite confident that we will see that.
Looking at some of the analysts that have been looking at the possibility ratios around ETFs, both on the Bitcoin side, but also on Ethereum. Ethereum being looked at very positively now. You've got Eric Balchunas here, Bloomberg analyst. He and Jeff both been on our show talking about this before. They're still holding the line at 90% on odds of approval. This is still by January 10th, which is that real big date. So timing here, very close to almost aligning with the Santa rally that could be happening in securities on the stock market. Would that possibly throw a wrench into maybe a 50K Bitcoin prior to an ETF if the stock market gets overheated right now before end of year?
Paul, we've seen a decorrelation with the stock market over the last 6 months with crypto. It's kind of taken a life of its own. We've seen it do very well during the dip that we had in equities. I know it's been a V-shaped dip, but don't forget that we had quite a large dip from the 45s to the 41s for S&P. And crypto did remarkably well through that period, obviously ETF related as well. But that amount of resilience, I think, shows that we have disconnected a little bit, and we can survive even a correction on equities.
I like it. This was Vandepop. This is where that number was coming from, fighting the resistance right now, but it he says, might likely see that a 45 to 50K pre-ETF on and or pre-halving, all that happening before May of next year. So definitely a lot of stuff. I want to get into top 5 projects that you've been eyeing. If you had a list of projects that you're really interested in, obviously I know you're working on Mantle, but what else is out there right now that's starting to perk your interest in terms of next cycle, especially?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, of course, Mantle is something I'm very bullish on. But apart from that, so Vertex and some of the other DEXs that we've seen after the Binance news, there's been an interest in DYDX, and I think one that I really like is Vertex. I think it's 1/7 of the size market cap of DYDX, and a very good competitor. So I think that's a space in general I'm very interested in, which is the perp space. And I think we'll see more and more decentralized players winning market share from the centralized players. So there might be some other very good DEXs that come along over the next 6 months. Really, what you're looking for is you want projects that can provide the centralized experience. Potentially, the login is similar. You have your email login, maybe you have a 2FA. Start to provide that kind of abstraction for the user. But behind the scenes, it's on chain. The money's being held on chain. You can see where it is. There's fairer matching, and nobody has an advantage. So I think this space in general of the decentralized exchanges and perpetuals especially is something that has product market fit and is small enough that you can see a 5x growth. You're going from 4% of the market share to 20% over the next few years. I think is very realistic. So yeah, Vertex is one project I like a lot.
Built on Arbitrum. I was just looking at their Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's any potential downfalls with Arbitrum as the selected, platform?
The good thing about layer 2s is if you're on a congested one or one that's not, the one that you want to stay on, it's very easy to deploy somewhere else. The deposit function of users can be abstracted as well. So, certainly at Mantle, we're trying to get them to move over. This is one that we're seeing they're doing the most volume. They did over $1 billion in volume a couple of days ago. So you can rest assured that we're reaching out to their BDs and trying to find a way. I don't think when they sit on Arbitrum, it doesn't mean that they have to stay. So
right.
We'll see.
Yeah, interesting. What else? What else is on your lookout list?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Solana ecosystem, things like PYTH. I mean, I think that community has done very well for itself with a 3x in price over the last few months, and there's a lot of wealth that's been created in that community. And I think we saw recently with PYTH, which we can get into, but there's a lot of other Solana tokens that are coming live. We have Jito. There's I'm not as big fan of meme coins personally. I'm a try, and I can't really get into Bonk and things like this and Pepe. That's not quite something that I feel comfortable investing in. If people want to have fun and do it, that's fine. But there's a few Solana projects that are coming online. I think some of the SPL tokens, are starting to show that there's interest. Initially, SPL tokens were not doing very well, and people were moving to ERC. But right now, given the support and the Solana price, I think Jupiter, I think some of the other ones that are coming online, potentially Drift, getting back into DEXs. Keeping an eye on them. I think at the right price, we would dip in. We're just a bit worried it's going to launch, and as soon as it launches, it's going to be a crazy valuation. So really depends what kind of entry you get.
This was
otherwise.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to kind of follow up on your point there with Solana, this was talking about altcoins could explode in the next couple of years. Is coming over from James from Invest Answers. He hits on PYTH a couple of times. We did a full video, kind of revealed PYTH as a strategy we were looking at, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm intrigued in the potential upside in comparison to Chainlink, which is a very solid project. How would you look at those two if you had to say, okay, I'm gonna kind of go one direction if I'm looking at Oracle-based type platforms or projects like PYTH or Link?
I mean, I think the ratio is kind of the valued between the two. Chainlink has been around much longer. It's a broader ecosystem. They have the CCTP bridge coming live, which is quite a large technical project that they've managed to accomplish, which is just like amazing what they've done. So that being at this sort of 14, 15 billion FTV makes sense. It's broken out of a long range where it was kind of fighting to break through that $10. I think Link is a good project. PYTH is amazing as well. It's quite a different project. Maybe it's not as technically complicated as Chainlink and CCTP, but it has this like huge backing of so many like traditional institutions like Jane Street and Citadel, and like all these large institutions are supporting it. Many of them are providing reference data. And the thing is, if ever we will see things like equities being traded on chain, you will need something like PYTH, because you will not be able to just kind of use NASDAQ data on chain. You will have to use the actual service providers that are the trading firms. They're getting all the fills. They're legally able to provide that data. Nobody like Chainlink can just plug into NASDAQ and pipe data. They will get sued. It's not legally
Right.
possible to use that data. It's not public data. But trading firms are allowed to use fills and their own estimate of prices. So it's quite an ingenious design that they've done. Now it obviously ties into the Solana narrative. So I think a ratio of what we're seeing is quite healthy.
Interesting. All right. So within Solana, okay, so you have the Solana system, ecosystem overall, kind of a hedge, I would say, versus Ethereum. And if you look at this next cycle, maybe we see that kind of alternative here, much like we saw ETH versus Bitcoin in the previous cycles, as an alternative hedge. What do you make of that? I mean, do you like that as a range for an investor when they look at it? Obviously not investment advice, but when you look at trying to hedge versus one versus the other, because they're completely two different ecosystems. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the Ethereum ecosystem in general has shown a lot of attention that it's been able to grab and just keep over years and years. So you're kind of making that safe, lower beta bet. I do think that that's probably the safest bet, might be the best sort of risk reward. The thing is with technology, like it evolves, and we will get new and new, generations of faster blockchains. I think there's quite a few new ones coming online. One project, it's not out yet, but Monad is an alternative layer one that I think will rival the speeds of things like Solana and will still be EVM compatible. So that's a narrative that we're seeing right now in the market. The player that's done this and announced it today is Sei. Sei is a Cosmos chain that I would say was trying to just have very competitive TPS. And it announced today that they're going to go down the EVM route. So they're kind of aligning with that type of design rather than the move languages, for example, or something like Aptos and Sui. And that's tagging along to the Monad narrative. I think Sei is kind of jumping on to what they're seeing with Monad, which will come online in Q1. So scaling the EVM, I think, is probably the most exciting bet that I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, and I think that's something also that's kind of a trend that's starting to take place right now, especially like you mentioned. We're going to see new blockchains coming on that are dealing with, TPS speeds that are unfathomable in terms of just being able to handle scale, which, Solana's doing a pretty interesting test right now, obviously with Firedancer rolling out and deploying. They've got this thing going on with Visa where payments might be, Solana Pay could be a real thing within this next cycle. Retail adoption could be coming on chain, which if you look at what Visa, if they have any potential of running nodes and things of that nature, there could be some interesting scenarios. Okay, so I like leveraging against both, if you're, whether you're an ETH, fan or a Solana fan and you like the ecosystems. But let's go further in and say Solana versus an Avalanche. Avalanche, a lot of recent news. Obviously, we just had John Woo on the show. And you look at what Solana has been able to do versus Avalanche, and then you kind of step back and say, okay, well, Avalanche has kind of taken a little bit of a different approach. What are your thoughts between those two projects right now?
Yeah, over time, my opinions have shifted. I think right now it's looking like the Solana sort of monolithic approach makes more sense as a counterbalance to Ethereum. The Avalanche and the subnets and what they're doing is closer to some of the other ecosystems. If you're going to believe that the experience is very monolithic as opposed to modular, then Solana is the bet that makes sense. I think Avalanche is kind of stuck in the middle of trying to find the use case for it. What kind of projects make sense? And we've seen some gaming projects try, but
yeah,
I think gaming projects always like to be potentially on their own subnet, but also on their own chain. I personally feel like Solana has shown more culture as well, like the resilience of the community there. They have a lot of NFTs and they have a lot of things going on that are unique to that ecosystem. Avalanche tried to get a little bit of traction with things like Stars Arena and the social-fi. They tried to tap into social, the trend with friend tech, but that didn't go very well because there are all kinds of hacks and things going on. So right now between the two, I think Solana is more poised to make that sort of barrier that you need to cross over to sustain into the next cycles.
Yeah, we're looking at both, and I think for most people, diversity is one of the things that's very good. From a strategy standpoint, I know that's what we do. When you look at 2024, how are you playing it right now? If you look at trying to develop a strategy, whether you're going into layer ones, you look at some of the layer two projects, whether you want to take a look at social-fi or gaming, is there any particular category that you're starting to research a little bit more?
Definitely always researching, all the major categories. Token-wise, what we'll see pretty soon is the large cross-chain messaging. So layer 0, wormhole. It's going to be similar to the Chainlink versus PYTH thing. The next time you'll be asking me about those two and which one of those two is better. And I think they'll both probably get tokens early in the year in 2024. They're competitors. There's some overlap in the approach, but so we're looking at that, definitely studying that. I want to be on top of it when that comes online very soon. I think both projects have a lot of merit, so we're diving in right now. We'll talk about which one looks better. Otherwise, some vanilla stuff. We really just think that the Ethereum ETF will probably be potentially successful, and I don't think we'll see altcoins have ETFs anytime soon. That might be years before we get like a Solana ETF. So I think there will be this catch-up period for Ethereum, and that should do well for all the kind of main Ethereum coins as well. Things like Chainlink, could do quite well once Ethereum ETF gets approved.
Jordi, it's always fun talking to you. I always learn something, and you have a different viewpoint on it, much more pragmatic, which I love to see in this space for sure, compared to some that are out there. So thanks again for coming in today. We appreciate it. I know it's late for you, so get some rest. Thanks for stopping in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
You bet. All right, so you guys are maybe tuned in over on the podcast side of things right now. Make sure and jump over to the YouTube channel. Get in on all this action. This is where you're going to learn a lot about Web3, what is really happening in blockchain. And the one thing I think that even Jordi mentioned there is how utility is starting to make its way into this cycle. I think that's one of the big things that you're probably going to see with Solana, Avalanche, others out there, along with many of the projects that we talked about today. So this is a place to catch it over here on YouTube. Make sure and drop a like and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, this will hopefully be your new home and destination for this next bull run. Of course, if you guys want to catch me, it's out there on X at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.